So Nikita and I just looked at another grant
I remember you
application.
talking about
Huh?
that. So I remember you were telling us about that.
And it's just a lot of work. So some people do use the full 15, but I didn't want to force it upon all of you. If you're more like me and you write, your max is a 10 to 12 page paper in graduate school.
Max, that's my max. No doubt.
That's how I
would
am.
have,
That's how I am.
no, I think that was for class that for. I'm trying to think, because I had wrote a paper on mass incarceration.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to think the paper that was for Nellis. I did like it required me like 10 pages, but I had 112. So I had a lot
Okay.
to talk about.
Yep.
So that was probably like my sophomore year. That was the last time I typed a page.
Okay.
So
It's definitely crazy to write a grant, and some people do it. I'm impressed by people that can do it, because I feel like I'm in the stage where I fake it until I make it. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like a lot of times they have this thing called, once you start getting a degree and a license, it's called imposter syndrome, and you don't feel like you're qualified to do all this stuff. You ever heard of that? And you basically feel like an imposter until you get out in the field and practice, and then maybe teach for a while, and you're like, oh, all these people are way more qualified than I am. It's like a normal feeling. In
okay.
fact,
So for these assignments, like so they say pick a week to lead a group. I led my group like 3 weeks ago.
okay,
So I just put a date in.
just right 3 weeks ago. He's like, I'm doing all my assignments right now.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Did somebody mess up
So
the
I'll
view?
write it in the comments or add a file.
You probably have to attach a
I
paper.
think I
Is that what you were asking? Do you guys know how to change the view?
The view of what?
Cause like you can't see my shit right now. There's Blake. Now my original channel is back up and running, so people get notified.
All right, let me look. I heard she lost yesterday.
Hi, Blake.
You brought her up. That's what made me.
What are they? I don't even know what was going on. What was the whole thing going on? So is that for here in Chaz, or is that all of the university?
All of the university. I think we
And then
got
that's-
service and Chaz.
That's in October. She said, hey Blake. That's for October, so like,
Yeah, so like our royal court now is gonna be like the royal court for next year.
and that's the person who like the one dude like stands up with her and like holds her arm like this and then walks her to go talk at the podium. Okay, you know what I'm talking about? I don't know if you guys know, but like,
I don't know if you know Keith.
yeah,
Keith Mrs.
right. He's the one who like holds her hand and like,
Yeah, so each is a Mr. and Miss.
okay,
The Mr. and Miss freshman title is gonna be next year. So like they can get a feel for how stuff is on campus, but we have a Mr. and Mrs. Sophomore,
okay,
Mr. and Miss Junior, and
Okay.
Mr. and Miss Senior, and then Mr. CSU and Miss CSU.
okay, right. And I was just figuring out most of that stuff because,
I don't know. I couldn't do nothing like that. Like I could if I probably put my mind to it, but I wouldn't want to because it takes too much time.
some of the, gosh, I wish I could find, maybe I'll just drag this over. So when it doesn't, you like, sometimes you go like this, yep, there it is. That's so weird though. Cause like, now I have to look up here to use my mouse. Imposter syndrome. Have you all ever heard of it? As you go further on and finish your degree, you'll see stuff like this. That's just, here we go. Is this, it's a freaking TED Talk. It'll get me blocked. I'm going to use this one first because it's a minute.
Do you constantly doubt yourself, think you're not smart enough, and can't be proud of anything you've done, no matter how successful you are in your field? If so, you might be suffering from imposter syndrome. Dictionary.com defines imposter syndrome as anxiety or self-doubt that results from persistently undervaluing one's competence and active role in achieving success, while falsely attributing one's accomplishments to luck or other external forces. These imposters are people who, despite their successes and external evidence of their ability, constantly question their own credibility and feel like fake. Horizons professionally, personally, or even in their interests. Facing imposter syndrome head-on may be beneficial to one's development and success. Feeling like a fake shouldn't stop you from trying new things. To overcome imposter syndrome, consider writing down your accomplishments, talking to a trusted friend or family member about how you feel, remembering that it's natural to make mistakes when beginning anything new, finding a mentor who has traveled a similar road, and establishing an attitude of gratitude.
So that's like a shorter one. I would show you the TED Talk on it, but it'll get me blocked. Got Andrew and Tiona and Blake. So this is another one. So just think about this as it is also the terrible noise that I'm not allowed to show. I thought that I had
Even after writing 11 books and winning several prestigious awards, Maya Angelou couldn't escape the nagging doubt that she hadn't really earned her accomplishment.
you know Maya Angelou?
Albert Einstein experienced something similar. He described himself as an involuntary swindler whose work didn't deserve as much attention as it had received. Accomplishments at the level of Angelou's or Einstein's are rare, but their feeling of fraudulence is extremely common. Why can't so many of us shake feelings that we haven't earned our accomplishments, or that our ideas and skills aren't worthy of others' attention? Psychologist Pauline Rose Clance was the first to study this unwarranted sense of insecurity. In her work as a therapist, she noticed many of her undergraduate patients shared a concern. Though they had high grades, they didn't believe they deserved their spots at the university. Some even believed their acceptance had been an admissions error. While Clance knew these fears were unfounded, she could also remember feeling the exact same way in graduate school. She and her patients experienced something that goes by a number of names: imposter phenomenon, imposter experience, and imposter syndrome. Together with colleague Suzanne Himes, Clance.
Yeah, if you have an actual group that like you led for trauma-informed care or like addiction recovery or like self-care, like act like you're going to get money for it.
Patients, though it may be more prevalent and disproportionately effective.
All right, and then for the link, I just put what I had.
Either pictures of what you did present, or if you remember the actual
I gotta go with those.
date. If you remember when you presented, you could put up the YouTube link of where I filmed it right here. Like it's being filmed right now.
Okay.
Are all of the seniors' grades due like this week? Do we have any graduating seniors?
I don't know.
I'm about to get not that I know of.
I feel like I have one, but they're in an independent study.
Probably.
So they're due a week early, basically, which is kind of weird to me, but it's okay. Like everything's okay.
Well, see, I'm up on everything.
What'd you say?
I'm up on everything now.
You're turning all of it in
Mm-hmm.
right now.
Well, I'm working on a paper. You got like 2 pages done.
Okay, that's the way to do it. Next week is May. That's crazy.
And then that's
Aspect of the experiences of underrepresented or disadvantaged groups. To call it a syndrome is to downplay how universal it is. It's not a disease or an abnormality, and it isn't necessarily tied to depression, anxiety, or self-esteem.
That's interesting.
Where do these feelings of fraudulence come from? People who are highly skilled or accomplished tend to think others are just as skilled. This can spiral into feelings that they don't deserve accolades and opportunities over other people. And as Angelou and Einstein experienced, there's often no threshold of accomplishment that puts these feelings to rest. Feelings of imposterism aren't restricted to highly skilled individuals either. Everyone is susceptible to a phenomenon known as pluralistic ignorance.
So I know these are big words, but essentially it's saying when we finish our degree, when you get your license, you'll have these feelings like, you know, am I competent in the field of social work? Can I practice in the field of social work? Remember, yes, we are training you guys to be ready. We're training you to be And you'll still be learning more while you're in the field. But a lot of times it'll come up like, I don't think that I'm good for this field, and people quit. So don't quit before the miracle. That's the number one thing to remember.
Where we each doubt ourselves privately, but believe we're alone in thinking that way
We
because
doubt
no one else
ourselves.
voices their doubts. Since it's tough to really know how hard our peers work, how difficult they find certain tasks, or how much they doubt themselves, there's no easy way to dismiss feelings that we're less capable than the people around us. Intense feelings of imposterism can prevent people from sharing their great ideas or applying for jobs and programs where they'd excel. At least so far, the most surefire way to combat imposter syndrome is to talk about it. Many people suffering from imposter syndrome are afraid that if they ask about their performance, their fears will be confirmed. And even when they receive positive feedback, it often fails to ease feelings of fraudulence. But on the other hand, hearing that an advisor or mentor has experienced feelings of imposterism can help relieve those feelings. The same goes for peers. Even simply finding out there's a term for these feelings can be an incredible relief. Once you're aware of the phenomenon, you can combat your own imposter syndrome by collecting and revisiting positive feedback. One scientist who kept blaming herself for problems in her lab started to document the causes every time something went wrong. Eventually, she realized most of the problems came from equipment failure and came to recognize her own competence. We may never be able to banish these feelings entirely, but we can have open conversations about academic or professional challenges. With increasing awareness of how common these experiences are, perhaps we can feel freer to be frank about our feelings and build confidence in some simple truths. You have talent, you are capable, and you belong. Everyone can use a little extra kick of confidence sometimes. Find out some tips and tricks for boosting yours with this video.
So essentially they're saying like it's normal to feel that way. But then sometimes when you give yourself accolades, it feels like this guy that says, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and by golly, people love me. And that's kind of a joke on Saturday Night Live. You would always see this dude, Stuart Smalley was his name. Here he is. It kind of was a joke, but sometimes.
Alright, I submitted everything but my final paper
Okay.
and the observation of the group. I know I think that's
So there's no noise. Damn it. It is kind of funny though. So we would watch this a lot growing up, and
I deserve good things. I am entitled to my share of happiness. I refuse to beat myself up. I am an attractive person. I am fun to be with. Daily affirmation with Stuart Smalley. Stuart Smalley is a caring nurturer, a member of several 12-step programs, but not a licensed therapist.
I'm going to do a terrific show today, and I'm going to help people because I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
so every week we'd get that on Saturday Night Live. And yes, it's kind of poking fun of it, but it's also acknowledging that we do need those affirmations, whether we want them or not. And sometimes you want to make fun of it. Like maybe it's more with men though, like men don't want to share those with each other and women are better at it. There's some research on that too. Men are just like, toughen up, don't cry, and deal with it or something like that, where you don't go to counseling or therapy. Like that's the way we were brought up. That's just like the norm of being brought up. Hopefully it's changing. Hopefully.
I guess I was brought up too.
Yeah.
Um,
Like deal with it, bro.
yeah,
Like
I just learned how to cry.
right. Yes. And so when doing some of this trauma stuff, we were going over trauma on Friday. No, it was Wednesday because I was in Toledo. Oh my gosh. I don't even know how we did that. So Nikita, and then on top of that, Nikita presented for us in Toledo, and the governor asked me and Perdomo to be in freaking Columbus. The governor wanted all the psychology and social work departments in a meeting on Friday. And that felt scary too, is that's where imposter syndrome really came out. Like here's all these super smart MDs and like psychiatrists and psychologists, and it just seemed scary, like we weren't qualified to be there, but we were, we just felt that way. And Nikita presented on specifically geriatric population that we had submitted. The governor is asking about doing an ACEs study in the state of Ohio, very similar to what we teach you guys about. That one was done, I think, in your state in 1997.
Wisconsin?
I think so. It was somewhere, they always say it was a Midwestern, are they considered Midwestern? It said like a Midwestern state. I feel like it was either Madison? Okay, that's where all the academics go. So, all right, yeah, we did get into different traumas, how you diagnose it, how when we're working with clients, how to like deal with it. And then the children's mandate, which is the most important as a therapist. We've got to do no harm.
Do no harm.
And I forget the big word.
How do you know that you are, how do you know that, sometimes as a human, you might want to do some things, not do some things, but do some things that you might like feel that is helpful, but in the customer's eyes, it's harmful.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you go about that? Like, because in my eyes, I'm seeing like, well, this, I feel like this can help you, this and this and this.
Mm-hmm.
But they eyes feel like, well, I don't feel like this is going to help. So how do you go about that?
That's a very good question. And it does start with like the proper training. So like as a therapist, being trained and like looking at the current research is key. They start with this quote. It says, if you don't think what I think, feel what I feel, experience what I experience, and see what I see, when I look at myself, others, and the world around me, how can you possibly know what is best for me?
Right.
And that's like a big question you'll always get as a therapist. People are like, what the fuck do you know? Like put it bluntly, like what the hell do you know about like
That's how
death and dying?
That's
And,
how I put that in, like I use that anyways, because like whenever I'm talking to somebody, like a lot of people where they go wrong at, and I feel like it's very selfish. A lot of people try to put their feet in other people's shoes
mm-hmm.
when listening to them. So it's like, well, if this was me or I would have did this, so how we two different people. Like, how would you know how I'm feeling, or how, like, just because that person embodied this situation, that I mean, I'm gonna go do the same thing. So I definitely understand that quote, because some people don't know what's best.
Okay.
But it say if you got that training though, and he's still like, this not good for me. So you just go with, well, like, well, okay, well, let's find something different.
It's and I think you're right about it's dangerous acting like an expert.
Yeah.
So I personally try to, I got freaking chocolate all over my finger. I try to humble myself sometimes. That does occasionally give me the chance to be humbled and to listen. And then also knowing some of these things. So like, what's the difference between acute stress and actual traumatic, post-traumatic stress, PTSD? So like acute stress is stuff we get during exam week, maybe. It's a normal response to something that's like 4 to 6 weeks. But PTSD is an exaggerated, prolonged response beyond 4 to 6 weeks. So if you got PTSD, you'll have dreams, you'll have nightmares, you'll have re-experiencing dysregulation of stress chemistry. Stress hormones don't come back down, so you're always on alert. Like, whoa.
People from the Army, veterans.
That's where it started, yes. And so this PowerPoint is one we've used as a train at Lighthouse Youth Services to show kids can also have PTSD, which they didn't recognize until like the past 10 or 12 years. They were like, nah, kids can't have it. You got to be in war to get that.
No, because if you with your kid for a certain amount of time and you're like this and they jump or something like that, I mean, that's some form of PTSD.
Even animals
That's what I'm
too.
saying,
Like
I
you've
just don't know
seen,
that.
I'm sure you've seen animals do that when you're
Yeah,
like,
but for sure.
yeah. So, here is, and then knowing trauma is a sensory experience is because of what happens to your brain and memory during the trauma. Oh, I showed this on Friday or Wednesday. All the parts of the brain and effects. I always need a charger too. Look at me, I'm down to like 30. Because I have iPhone 7. That's the problem.
Yeah, you gotta get rid of that.
Yeah, see that.
I didn't even know people still have
When's the last time they had a home button?
That's what I'm saying.
I got these.
These get with XR or something. Yeah.
Is that what they're called?
Yeah, XR. You gotta get you something. If no phone, let's start messing up. You'll start freezing.
They're all dead. The kids like watch stuff on.
Oh, okay.
6, 7, and maybe 8. I'm about old enough. Somebody would give me their old phone. It would be new for me, I think. But do everybody sell their phone back now? They just like, you don't keep old phones anymore like we did for a backup. You just sell them. They give you money for it, right?
No, I'm definitely keeping my phone when I get my new phone.
I would. It's a good backup. So trauma is all over. Well, here we go. So the right brain is mostly senses, memory, affect, and emotional regulation, but the left brain is language, reasoning, thinking, and understanding and processing. So that's where trauma is stored. Trauma is stored in your right brain, but the right brain controls if you're left-handed. That's what always is confusing to me.
So have you ever heard them saying, don't let your
Right hand
know what your right hand is doing?
from the Bible. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Did you have a question? Okay. So stress response system, exposure to trauma, survivor is frozen in an activated state of arousal. Because your brain does disconnect. So like if you got robbed and somebody's like, why didn't you just kick him in the nuts? And it's like, I was frozen. Why didn't you just like grab his gun or something stupid? Why didn't you fight back? Well, you're frozen because you're traumatized. You're sitting there frozen because your brain disconnects. So it says survivor is frozen, activated state of arousal, state of fear, state of alert, survival mode. And then stress hormones are released, cortisol, adrenaline, like it pumps all throughout your body. And that's what trauma looks like. Here's your stress response. Uh-oh.
yeah.
He said, yeah. So you get into fight versus flight. So noticeable effect, your pupils dilate if somebody like traumatizes you. Yes. When you're terrified. So fight versus flight. So noticeable effects, your pupils dilate, mouth goes dry, neck and shoulder muscles tense, heart pumps faster, chest pains, palpitations, sweating, muscles tense for action, breathing fast and shallow, hyperventilation even, that's where you have a anxiety attack. Oxygen needed for muscles. So you need
I
more.
probably had like 3 of those, 2. I don't never like my pupils.
Right, you might not be able to see that.
Nobody say
like,
yeah, but I don't think nobody.
as
I don't know,
mentioned.
'cause I never actually showed fear, so I don't know. But my breathing, my heart is speed up.
Uh-huh.
My hands get sweaty, and that's about it.
Right. I hope it doesn't fall off the wall.
I thought it was sliding down.
I know. So here's the hidden effects. Brain and body get ready for action. Adrenaline is released for fight or flight. Your blood pressure rises. Your liver releases glucose to provide energy for muscles. Your digestion slows or ceases sphincter closes, then relaxed, and then cortisol released defends the immune system. Or maybe that says stresses the immune system. I can't read it. Depresses the immune system. So, with trauma, this is stuff to keep in mind as a therapist. This surge in stress hormones creates change in the brain. It actually damages the brain. So if kids are traumatized, it damages their brain. Changes in the brain cause changes in the person's behavior, the survivor, its cognitive, behavioral, and emotional functions. And then left brain versus right brain is what this is. So in left brain, both brain hemispheres are affected. The first thing that happens when you're traumatized is that the left and the right brain don't integrate and work together. There's no cooperation between the hemispheres. So like, that's why you freeze. Like your brain's not telling your body to like run or to fight back or to, because it separates. And left brain is analysis, logic, lists, numbers, words, and lines. The right brain is like colors, daydreaming, 3D, rhythm, imagination, and synthesis. So how trauma affects the left brain? Number one is no language. So you can't talk. You're just like silent. Like somebody's robbing your ass, put a gun to your head, and you're just silent. No reasoning skills. You're unable to make sense out of what happened. The neurons in the hippocampus are damaged significantly by the stress and hormone release. Learning, processing, and focusing is impaired. Now on the right brain, it says trauma memory is stored here. So on the right brain, your trauma gets stored in the right brain, which is your artistic side, like left-handed painting. No words to describe, only sensory memories, sight, sounds, touch, and smell and taste. So that's why when you work with a traumatized person, you do drawing and coloring and like gardening, horticulture therapy, yoga, because they have no words from their left brain. The trauma memory stored in the right brain, so you got to trigger whatever part it was stored in. They might have iconic symbolization, like images of the trauma, like dude holding a gun to their head, or affect dysregulation. This,
those types of activities with
when you work with traumatized people, they might not be able to describe what it is that happened to them because it's stored in a place that you got to use yoga to release it, or artistry, or gardening. This is actually really sad. I need to get into. Let me see if the story's here.
I ain't gonna lie, when I was a kid, I would definitely be scared to put my baby on her.
Oh, right.
Especially on the stomach though. Like, but I heard you're not supposed to let baby on the back either. Like, I don't know what to believe, honestly.
Right. So it goes from the nursery, tracing the roots of violence, 1997. I want to see if I can look this up, if there's an audio of this. Goes from the nursery, tracing the roots of violence. Uh-oh. Are you?
Yes, my brother just had a baby boy.
Yay.
It's gonna be my turn.
My other brother gave me a niece. So excited for home.
So you got a nephew?
Yup. Baby cut here.
Oh, there's a whole. Holy crap. Okay.
Those from nursery.
Yes. Trauma.
And see, I had a teacher who said like she used to see ghosts when she was a younger kid.
Really?
Yeah, like she said she would be at her grandma's house and be laying in her bed and she could hear somebody talking to her. And it was a lady in a white dress with like blood on it.
Really?
She wouldn't say anything to her, but she would hear.
So this is more specific to, it talks about trauma. A lot of us think when you're that age, you're not going to remember shit.
Yeah.
And so I think that is really the point they're trying to hit on, that you actually,
I still remember stuff when I was like
The concept of ghosts in the nursery with
Real talk. Like, I still remember stuff since I was a kid, like, really,
Okay.
good and bad.
How our past affects our future. So this is just 4 minutes. I'm hoping this does it justice because it is really hard to explain.
was developed in 1975 by Selma Freyberg, a psychoanalyst and an early pioneer of infant mental. We all have heard stories about ghosts that continue heard. Similarly, Freyberg uses the term ghost to describe how our unprocessed traumatic childhood experiences with our parents may influence.
I don't know why it's doing that, but
That parents who were neglected, abused, or traumatized as children may unknowingly.
so as a kid, if you are traumatized, and they use the example like of kids that are in a Russian, like 35 different cribs, as opposed to like a first world baby that when it's hungry, you feed it. When it's tired, you rock it to sleep. And when it's got a wet diaper, you change it. But when there's 35 kids and only one person is taking care of all 35, they got to go through all of these. And they cry when their diaper ain't changed or if they're hungry. And they could cry for hours because they've got 35 kids to get through feeding or whatever. That crying sets off cortisol in the brain. This is like pissing me off. And like ruins your upbringing to where you are permanently traumatized from crying that much and the cortisol in your body. So you're always on alert and like nervous and like conscious of what's going on. And it affects your development. So point in case is that it affects your development. Let's see if it wants to work.
The neglect and abuse they endured at youth. So the question becomes, what summons the ghosts in the nursery? Why are some parents able to quickly recognize the presence of their ghosts of the past and banish them accordingly? But why do others get possessed by ghosts generation after generation? In her seminal article, Freyberg described a clinical case of a patient named Mary. Shortly after Mary was born, her mother suffered postpartum psychosis and attempted suicide. Mary's mom was placed in a psychiatric hospital for an extended period of time and was unable to care for Mary. Mary's dad was also in and out of jail. Mary experienced neglect when she was an infant as she moved from one place to another to live with different relatives. When Mary became older and became a mom, she struggled to provide care for her baby. By the time Mary was referred to Freyberg Mental Health Clinic, the baby was already showing signs of difficulty bonding with his mom. During home visit appointments, the therapist noticed how Mary would frequently leave her baby by himself and not respond to her baby's cries. Even when the therapist asked Mary how she comforted her baby, Mary could not answer. Freyberg stated, "It's almost as if the mother did not hear her baby's cries." In a way, maternal instincts that come easily to most mothers was a challenging exercise for Mary, and she inadvertently repeated a similar pattern of neglect she experienced as a child. So, what causes Mary to repeat her past with her current child? Freyberg stated that parents recreate their past when they cannot remember or process the emotions associated with their trauma. In Mary's case, although she was able to remember some of the details of her neglect, she was unable to recall how scared and helpless she felt. In other words, we repeat the tragedy we cannot remember. Gradually in therapy, Mary was able to recall these intense negative emotions she felt as a child from neglect. In doing so, she began to see how her current parenting style may not adequately care for her baby. Only then did Mary start taking concrete steps to change her parenting style. Freyberg stated succinctly, "Only when the mother's cries are heard will she hear her child's cries." In essence, Freyberg made an essential implication that our experience in the early years lays the groundwork for how we love, bond, and care for our children. This statement is supported by developmental neuroscience. The human brain reaches 90% of its size within the first 4 years of life. During that crucial time, through our care and attention, our brains begin to lay the foundation for reward circuitry for relationship and love. In response to receiving love, we learn to appreciate the pleasure of giving love and caring for others. In other words, to give love, we need to know love first. Thus, our parenting instincts were crafted way before we became parents. This critical point of intergenerational transmission of love and trauma embedded in the article Ghosts in the Nursery becomes foundational in understanding infant mental health. The concept further underscores that parents and infants' mental health are inextricably linked to one another. Therefore, if we wish to improve children's mental well-being, we must also understand parents' stories and struggles. Okay, that's good enough for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this topic helpful, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to see more topics in our.
And it's crazy that you said that because I was just watching my show, Station 19, and basically, like, she was getting therapy from one of the firefighter therapists, and she was basically saying, like, she couldn't rest, like, she was up, she was cleaning her house all night till, like, their appointment in the morning till 8 a.m. And she's like, I can't sleep, I can't rest. And like she asked her when was the last time. She's very obsessed with like wanting to win and like wanting to be in charge. And like so she asked her when was the first time he wanted to win. And like she said when she was 3 years old, she saw her cousin at track meet and she saw the disappointment in her father's eyes when her cousin lost the race. So she wanted to gain her father's approval and win for him. So like at the end she ended up going through the whole process and like telling her, she was holding her 3-year-old self and telling her that she could rest and then she then herself could rest. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So that's really weird that he said like in order for her to care for her child, she had to care for her past child. That's really, and I think it also goes into generational trauma because like they say like us today still have trauma or have the feelings of trauma from slavery.
Yes,
And that's why we
there is
respond to certain stuff.
clear
certain
research on
way.
that.
So,
I was going to say that there is intergenerational trauma shown with slavery and the Jews during World War II. So those are the 2 research studies they've done, and it's to break a cycle of trauma that's gone on for even like decades or centuries or millennia is a lot of work. So like it's like digging deep, like it's going back.
even like it be like small stuff, like they say, like if you see a bunch of black people laughing, like they'll like push you, like they'll laugh so hard that they push you.
Huh?
But it's like back then they had to push each other to get each other to stop laughing because they couldn't laugh because they were slaves. So it's just a lot of different stuff that black people do today that goes back, way back.
Right. Yeah, so this is, I know this is a 98-page PowerPoint, but there's a lot on trauma. So your experience becomes your biology. Like it gets inbred into your DNA and shit. Like what you just said, like that becomes part of your DNA. And so it may be difficult to believe, but one traumatic event in anyone's life, especially a child's, can alter both the structure and the chemistry of the brain. And I don't know if I told you guys this about my wife had a oldest sister born in 1977 and was hit by a car. And her older sister was in the womb when the 2-year-old got hit by a car. And her mom, she actually said I told the story backwards. So I thought it was her mom was dropping off the kids at a baseball practice her dad was giving. Her dad was maybe the umpire. The kid saw the dad and ran across the street and got hit. She said it was actually, the kids were already across the street. Her mom was driving off and then honked and said bye, and the 2-year-old went running back to the mom and got hit by a car. So like the whole family was traumatized, and I see that in the way that they kind of raise our children. My wife and her mom, and like just fear of driving them anywhere, fear of going anywhere. Like you don't need to drive there if you know, like watch them and hold their hand. Like a lot of anxiety, and we see that even come out in like my daughter. So it's like, whoa, I didn't realize how that generational trauma would pass, but it's there. No matter what, it's there. So you pass that on. Where is? I just thought this one would be an important one for you guys. I forget if some of you are going to do your internships with like trauma, but most social work diagnoses include a trauma of some sort, no matter what. Even if it's that your dad was an alcoholic, but you were not, but you experienced those effects of alcoholism and neglect and stuff like that. But stressed attachments and secure attachments. I know this is going back to HPSC, but these are some of the things that will affect us. If you have a stress attachment, you've got chaotic biochemical changes that interferes with the brain's coping mechanism. You'll have problems with emotional regulation, relationships, identity formation, and the capacity to cope with stress. If you had a secure attachment growing up, which is hard to do, but some of us did, you would have growth facilitated environment, strong neuronal connections, and then integrates your brain systems and strengthens the capacity to cope with stress. So it does help your relationships. But if we're grown up and have a trauma or insecure attachment, it can be hard, like in relationships, like maybe you're texting them all the time. Like, where are you at? What are you doing? Who are you with? Why are you with them? What's going on? And like, there's an insecure attachment there. Like, you can't let them be. Or maybe there was a bad relationship that caused those thoughts or feeling. Like, they cheated on me, or they did something weird, or they did, different ways things come up. Oh yeah, I always show this one to HBSE too. I don't even know if it works. I guess it does. This is how the brain again. It's the last form.
Everyone in a community has a vested interest in everyone else's children, because everyone else's children determine the next adult population that makes for a successful society. Built into our biology is the need to have responsive interactions with adults.
Neglect for children is when they don't get what the brain is expecting to get, what the child is expecting to get, what we are biologically prepared and waiting for, which is input from those around us.
It's this back and forth serve and return interaction that literally shapes the architecture of the brain.
Serve and return begins when a child looks at something or observes something, makes an utterance, and that represents the serve. And the return is when the parent notices the child doing these things.
So this is interesting with the date and age of texting and like computers and all the fucking distractions that we have. Our kids are serving shit to us and we don't return it. And it affects the brain. I find myself doing it, so I'm telling on myself, but like we are so freaking distracted. It's like absurd, but this is what it does.
Responds to the child.
Under conditions where serve and return is broken, you literally are pulling away what is the essential ingredient of the development of human brain architecture.
It was a really compelling series of experiments where they started by videotaping the mother and the baby engaging in cooing and smiling. And then they asked the mother to basically put on a blank face and not respond at all. When a baby is not attended to, that is a sign of danger to the baby biologically. So the stress systems become activated.
In a brain that is constantly bathed in stress hormones, not that's up and down, that comes with normal development. Certain key synapses, the connections between nerves, fail to form, and critical regions of the brain.
So neglect both fails to provide the stimulation that's needed to develop the basic architecture, and when it's at a certain level, is one of the most potent activators of the stress biology of a young child. So you get a double whammy.
Science points to 4 categories of the spectrum of neglect. The first category would be what's called occasional inattention, where children experience responsiveness most of the time, but occasionally adults don't respond. There's no harm in that, and in fact, there's probably some benefit.
A child can learn to self-soothe and explore the environment. All of those opportunities build brain architecture.
The second category, scientists would call chronic understimulation, is where on a regular basis, children have less interaction with the adults around them than is needed for healthy development.
Those children typically, when provided with enriched learning opportunities and more typical levels of serve and return, will show catch-up.
The third category is what science would call severe neglect in a family where not only are there prolonged periods of inattention and lack of responsiveness, but often also associated with not being fed enough, not being bathed enough, not having basic needs met.
Neglect is a huge problem in the US. Children are much more likely to be neglected than they are to experience any other kind of maltreatment.
We see the child really being at risk for much more substantial kinds of deficits down the road that don't necessarily get easily fixed or ameliorated. This is where we really need to think about more complicated and often more intensive strategies to help undo those effects.
The fourth category, called severe neglect, generally found in institutional settings as a result of children living in kind of warehouse type situation in orphanages.
And it doesn't have to even be as extreme as orphanages. It can be experiences that are regretfully occurring in many, many parts of our country.
Often institutional care in this country is under the euphemistic name of transitional care or temporary care or assessment facilities.
If you think about what institutional or residential care would look like for an infant, where there's somebody new coming onto the shift every 8 hours, it really alters the development of the child's brain architecture and other aspects of the child's development.
We have the potential to change children's developmental trajectories.
Interventions can apply to parents, to foster parents or adoptive parents in childcare settings, Head Start settings, and other kinds of settings. And really, what they're about is attuning people to the serve and return process.
Neglecting young children is neglecting the foundations of a healthy next generation. The community pays a huge price later in terms of the problems of the next generation, whether it be educational achievement, economic productivity, good citizenship, the ability to parent the next generation.
All right, see you guys.
All of the things that have to do with a healthy, prosperous society.